On the topic of dream teams, you can't dream without sleep, so let me tell you about the way I've been upping my REM hours. As the summer months roll around and it's getting dark later, I found it tougher to drift off, but since coming across Manta Sleep, my problems have gone. Thanks to their comfortable light-cancelling masks, getting 8 hours has never been easier. Connect to the Bluetooth, play whichever relaxing ambience you fancy, and drift into the deepest of sleeps. Lightweight and foldable, their portability means you can sleep wherever you want. You can't overemphasize the importance of rest, so check out Manta Sleep from the link in the description and use this code for 10% off. Now, let's get to the story of Cruyff's Barcelona. The year was 1988, and Barcelona was a club in crisis. Winning La Liga merely once in 14 years, everything was rotting. The performances, toothless, results, awful, attendances poor, and atmosphere dead. This former powerhouse was desperate for a rehaul. This came in an unexpected form with the Hesperia mutiny, when 22 players and the head coach gathered in front of the press at a local hotel to condemn club president Josep Luis Núñez. The mutiny ultimately backfired, as fans sided with the president, who dumped the manager and released 14 of the players in a grand cleanup, leaving a 10-man squad that needed rebuilding, but he couldn't do it alone. Exactly a decade prior, the Blaugrana saw the departure of a superstar who had finally brought winning ways and silverware back to Barca to become the ultimate hero of the Catalans. Johan Cruyff did plenty in those 5 years, blending creativity with class to revolutionise their style and reawaken hope like no other. As the catalyst of change in the 70s, Núñez thought, why wouldn't it work now? Especially given the Dutchman's record from the sidelines. In '85, Cruyff began his coaching career back at Ajax, and in 3 years modernised the whole club. Inspired by his mentor Rinus Michels, Cruyff combined the concept of total football with an attacking possession-based philosophy, implementing a 3-4-3 system that he demanded of every single Ajax coach from grassroots upwards. This focus on youth development also helped the emergence of the stars of the upcoming Dutch generation. Silverware had come his way in Amsterdam, but it wasn't the point. He changed Ajax's ethos, so it was a waiting game for true success, and when it all blossomed into the 90s, Cruyff was long gone, having accepted the challenge at Barcelona. Now at the helm of a completely remodelled side that, ignoring Gary Lineker, was void of any marquee names, the young coach had to make do, and alongside right-hand man Carlos Rexach, Cruyff set about transforming the Blaugrana.
Si nosotros queremos tener una temporada buena, no una temporada mala como el año pasado, nosotros aquí necesitamos también la ayuda al público. Y no los broncas. ¿Por qué? No hay que mirar atrás, hay que mirar delante.
Enforcing his ideas at the Nou Camp was going to be difficult, as he didn't have much choice in the tools at his disposal, and the club's culture didn't align with Ajax's. He craved simplicity when everyone else was complicating things, and the initial weeks were spent convincing skeptics who resisted his methods, so still needing to fine-tune his man management, the Dutchman often didn't have the patience. Pressure was piling up fast. Results didn't meet the sky-high expectations, and his possession-heavy style bored both the media and the culés, who needed something to cheer about. Again, the manager was playing the long game that only he had the vision for, and this first campaign was simply Cruyff placing down the launch pad before setting off. With each flip of the calendar's pages, the cogs began turning more smoothly. Barca's current crop were now a little more fluid, having embraced a new way of one-touch football, and buzz among the fans loudened because despite falling short once more in the league, they reached the final of the European Cup Winners' Cup. Facing Sampdoria in the Swiss city of Bern, an opener from their top marksman Julio Salinas was backed up at the death by Lopez Recate to officially declare Cruyff's debut season a triumph. This was just the start though, and over the summer of '89, the management duo assessed, analysed and concluded that to get Barca playing how he wants, they need some new personnel. Offloading Lineker for over €1 million, they had cash to spend, and with the maximum of 3 foreign players rule still in use, Cruyff's choices had to be judicious. His first wasn't even a risk. PSV's Ronald Koeman had spent a while on his radar. After a season as his coach in Amsterdam, Cruyff just knew. The attacking defender was the epitome of a total footballer, raised in the post-Michels era, who could command a backline or midfield with ease, and coming off the back of a 21-goal campaign, had a knack for finding the back of the net. Next was less of a guarantee. In northern Italy, a 24-year-old Michael Laudrup stood at a juncture. Failing to live up to Platini's standards, the Dane's time in black and white had been injury-plagued and shallow in the goals department. Though the icon's famed eye for talent looked deeper, seeing the untapped potential of the Bianconero, who believed his positional versatility, creative gifts and technical acumen could shine through in Spain, where defending wasn't the impetus. Hearing that his idol was building something special across the Mediterranean, the playmaker packed his bags. The pair impressed immediately. Inside the first month, both had stamped their names on the score sheet more than once and naturally gelled with the team around them, who had now adopted Cruyffism. Koeman was on top of the world, coming off a European treble with PSV, and stood over all set pieces from penalties to free kicks, grabbing 18 goals as top scorer. It was his on-ball quality that Cruyff found interesting. For his diamond, he needed mobile defenders who could cope with the high line but were also comfortable in possession and could kill threats on the back foot to then carry it into midfield. Tintin, as he was nicknamed, was the model candidate for this role. A shrewd reader of the game, robust tackler and fantastic passer from all ranges, the sweeper was dictatorial from the first whistle, proving his place amongst the world's finest. At the other end of the pitch, the Prince of Denmark was doing something similar. Serving as the maestro up top, the 24-year-old was ignited by his boyhood hero, whose streamlined philosophy and blunt reasoning resonated with him. Moving Laudrup inside from the wing, Cruyff played him as the false nine between midfield and attack, a more involved free role for him to showcase his skill. Merciless in one-on-ones, the Dane was their artist, gliding with balletic grace across the pitch in a tribute to his great coach, whose main goal of manipulating the opposition's shape and finding space to exploit was answered by the number 9. In April 1990, they featured in the Copa del Rey final, beating Real Madrid for a second time that year, hinting at the gap between the sides narrowing. And it was about time. The past 5 years had been dominated by Los Blancos during the illustrious era known as Quinta del Buitre, or Vulture's cohorts, which heralded the rise of homegrown talent, spearheaded by Emilio Butragueño. Starring the likes of Michel, Bernd Schuster and Hugo Sanchez, they had reigned supreme, leaving Barca in their shadow, but a power shift was on the horizon. To achieve this, Cruyff again took a leaf out of Michel's book, but his plan had been in motion since day one. La Masia, the club's youth programme, was 7 years old by the time of his appointment, looking a little different to now. The dormitory for youth prospects was an old farmhouse local to the Nou Camp. Time with Ajax taught him that if he wanted to change the principles of a club, the most economical way is to cultivate an elite academy, acting as a seedbed for his philosophy. So he made sure that all youth teams were training in 3-4-3 and encouraged to pass quickly over short distances with as few touches as possible. Then in theory, the cream of La Masia's crop could graduate smoothly into the first team and become its nucleus, while saving money in the process to splash on the stars. Validation came at the turn of the decade in the form of Josep Guardiola. The tale goes that in Cruyff's first week, he went to watch the B team and saw the 17-year-old deployed out wide, barely getting a sniff. So he told the coach to bring him in from the right as their pivot, and after 2 years, Guardiola mastered the role. Talented of course, Guardiola's curiosity and work ethic were his bolstering traits, becoming obsessed with game preparation, taking Cruyff's every word as gospel as he tried to grow into the seniors. He was the textbook example of a dedicated athlete, driving a humble VW Golf, avoiding designer, and rarely seen in the queue of a nightclub. Pep wasn't one to get caught up in the excitement.
Soy más bien técnico y que sobre todo intento jugar muy fácil, sobre todo no complicarse nada la vida.
The Cruyff cookie cutter had come to life. Still, by the summer, the league title remained the albatross around their necks, so the pair studied the separating factor that kept Real on top: goals. Madrid had only conceded one less than Barca, but had scored 24 times more to break a century of goals in 9 months. Salinas alone wasn't quite cutting it, so having offloaded the Brazilian centre-half Aloisio, they went on a European star search for the man to elevate them. Cruyff had someone in mind, an individual who he'd seen hog the Nou Camp spotlight a year earlier. This took them southeast to the Bulgarian capital of Sofia, where a fiery 24-year-old was outscoring everyone. Golden boot in hand, Hristo Stoichkov was exactly what Cruyff was looking for: an unstoppable force, hungry for success and flexible on the offense. Explosively pacey, the direct forward was shredding apart backlines for fun, and after a decade of soccer on his motherland, it was time for an upgrade. Racking up 38 goals in 30 games, the only thing as thunderous as his left foot was Stoichkov's temper. Narrowly avoiding a lifetime ban for fighting just weeks into his Sofia stint, the Dutchman was wary but optimistic, hoping to harness his wild temperament. He had again struck gold, splashing the cash on an absurdly gifted player who not only fit his system like a jigsaw puzzle, but required zero time to acclimate. Contributing a goal in each of their opening 3 matches, as a lone striker in the first, part of a duo in the second, and from the right in the third, Stoichkov was as versatile as he was clinical. Keen to test defences, his dribbling at full speed was electrifying, adding a whole new dimension to the attack, and with a hat-trick coming a couple months in, he'd won over the doubtful culés. Before the days of social media, the average fan had a less comprehensive understanding of the sport and were limited to World Cup and European final highlights for finding out about the foreign names worth knowing. In the Bulgarian's case, the press spread more word about his short fuse than his quality, but when the Stoichkov-led Barcelona collected 32 points from a possible 39, the haters were silenced. That was until the December El Clasico, when the media was validated by the 8, who stamped on the referee's foot to receive a 2-month ban and enraged the Nou Camp. Stoichkov had imploded. By this point, Barca were leading the league charge, and should things go awry, it would be easy to name a scapegoat. Fortune favoured the Blaugrana this time though. Out of nowhere, Los Blancos fell into collapse, desperate to find some sort of rhythm with 2 managerial changes to utterly throw them off. Cruyff and co were set to capitalise. 3 years into his project, the players were more expressive, all while maintaining a disciplined framework. With Koeman its commander, the backline pressed high to suffocate danger, fetched the ball and handed it off to the midfield for protection. Led by Jose Mari Bequero, the Spaniards were happy to just sit and pass, patiently probing for an opening before letting Laudrup work his magic. Never staying put, the Dane was always on the move, drifting about behind the front line, humiliating markers with a silky change of direction and his signature La Croqueta move. Missing the Bulgarian, he stepped up in a major way, volleying an opener in a 2-1 El Clasico triumph to kick off a 4-game streak, flexing his lesser-known knack of scoring. Cushioned by Cruyff's protection in the media, Stoichkov was met with some apprehension upon his return, but in a display of character, his winner against Tenerife was just the beginning of his redemption. Pulverising Bilbao with a first-half hat-trick, he was making up for lost time, later adding a penalty to make it 4, reminding Spain that he was much more than just a hothead. The Dutchman's vision was finally brought to life, completed by the returnee, and the fog on the road to the title cleared. In its place though came smoke. Cruyff had a heart attack, mirroring his late father who he'd lost when only 12 years old, and Rashak took over as interim while the coach got treatment. A 20-a-day smoker, there was no mystery as to the cause of it, but after his double heart bypass surgery, he gave up the habit in some style with a PSA TV ad directed to the people of Catalonia, and replaced his sideline tradition with lollipops. Within 2 weeks, he was back at the wheel, eager to finish the job, and having endured a 6-year drought, Barcelona were crowned champions of La Liga. There was evidence to suggest that Cruyff's Barca could translate their domestic form into continental, brushing past Baggio's Juventus to make the final of the UEFA Cup Winners' Cup, and despite a Mark Hughes double deciding it in Manchester United's favour, the Blaugrana had momentum and were in the mood to conquer. The Big Ears was nowhere to be seen in the Catalan cabinet, and attaining it for a first time was bound to be the toughest test in their history. Reinforcing the squad with Atletico's defensive stalwart Juan Carlos and Miguel Angel Nadal from Mallorca, another Koeman type, he brought the hardman spirit needed to fortify them. To uphold the principles of total football, he welcomed Ajax's Richard Witschke, a tall and graceful young midfielder who seamlessly fit in. The most notable addition was that of Guardiola, who after his first minutes in December of 1990 had become an undroppable linchpin of the B-side, so across the summer months of prep, the Dutchman was convinced. Since stepping into the dressing room at 19, his education began, absorbing information from his seniors like a sponge, quizzing his teammates to no end, and revising tactics as homework in free time. What he lacked in pace, stature and strength was made up for in his appetite for learning, something the manager admired, taking him on as apprentice for the year ahead. Uninvolved for the first 5 matches, the Catalans got off to an awful start, conceding 9 times and dropping 9 points to expose a defensive frailty. For the grueling month of October, Cruyff penciled in Pep to sit ahead of the back line as they took on their main competition. A low-scoring tie at the Bernabeu and 2 clean-sheet victories over Atleti as they reclaimed the Supercopa was sufficient proof, and the pencil marks were overlined in pen ink. Guardiola became Cruyff's lieutenant from the pivote role, setting the tempo as the deep-lying playmaker who links the defence to attack. Under Cruyff's tutelage, Pep flourished, getting a grip of when to hold or pass, when to sit or explore. It was as if he had a bird's eye view of the pitch, a freaky degree of intelligence for a 20-year-old. Executing his coach's instructions to a T, Guardiola was an extension of his right arm, and thanks to his sharpness at the base of midfield, Cruyff was able to realise his dream team. Fusing the Dutch ways with the South American tango approach, he crafted Tiki-Taka, a style characterised by short, quick sequences of passing to dominate possession. Fundamental to which was the triangular positioning and concept of pass and move, standards of the modern game, but not back then. Introducing them to rondos, a training style Cruyff popularised, they practiced, and Barca became unplayable at their best, monopolising possession to epitomise the coach's old adage.
Pero mientras tú tienes el balón, el otro no puede marcar un gol. Entonces es cuestión de organización y sobre todo la posición.
Showing a far greater defensive resilience, they were more compact and harder to breach with Guardiola's protection, who as the metronome kept the tempo at perfect pitch. Aiming to always keep pass accuracy over 90, the team relied on short first-time exchanges to tire out opponents before breaking them down, and after years under Cruyff, the Spaniards were well versed. The squad had a contingent of Basque players, from veteran captain Jose Ramon Alexanco to Baquero, his second in command, reliable shot stopper Andoni Zubizarreta, all-rounded attacker John Andoni Goicoechea, zippy left winger Chiki Bejaristain, and the aforementioned Salinas, a truly super sub. They made up the team's backbone, a group of gifted hard workers that brought a sense of unity to the squad. The relationship between Laudrup and Stoichkov changed this year. Keen to maximise his chances, Cruyff moved the Bulgarian into the number 9 role and placed the Dane in the hole behind him to perform playmaking duties as a centralised enganche. Much like Beauty and the Beast, these two were on opposite ends of the spectrum, but for the fire to roar, there must be a spark. Pulling the strings as the orchestrator of their attacks, Laudrup could see runs and execute passes like no other, and with a finisher of Stoichkov's calibre on the end of them, there was only one outcome. Freed of any defensive duties, he let his instincts take control, and the pair made each other better, leading the charge of something special. Into the new year, the balancing act of 3 different competitions took its toll. Real were sitting pretty at the head of the table, and a shootout went the way of Valencia to usher them out of the Copa del Rey. However, Cruyff's attention had turned, seeing an opening in Europe. Only 7 other teams were left in the cup, none of which struck fear. No Milan, no Bayern, no United, this was their golden opportunity, and beating Sparta Prague, Dinamo Kiev, and then Benfica, in front of 100,000 at the Nou Camp, they made the final. In London, they locked horns with a familiar face, Boškov's Sampdoria, who are enjoying their renaissance. For the first time ever or since, the Scudetto was adorned in Blucher Chiati colours, and led by their best front line in history, the Italians were to be feared. Seeking revenge after '89, Sampdoria, like Barca, were yet to hold this European Cup, so both were racked with tension as the first whistle blew. Famously, Cruyff's last words to his men were
Salir y disfrutar.
Salir y disfrutar.
Entonces hay que disfrutar.
And in Kappa's Catalan flag-coloured kit, Barca did just that. Despite the high stakes, no one strayed from the game plan. Calm, patient and decisive in possession, while compact out of it. Stoichkov jabbed one way and Vialli swung the other, yet thanks to 2 remarkable goalkeeping performances, the deadlock endured the full 90. Goicoechea entered the frame as the Blaugrana pushed further to get ahead, with even the wing-backs advanced, and Eusebio Sacristan was brought down on the edge of the box. Falling on the 112th minute, this was in range for one of the planet's best takers, and the centre-back punished the Italians. A world-class strike from a world-class player, Pagliuca had no chance, and the Dutchman returned to the defence with a moment to protect. The ref called it, and Wembley erupted in blue and red as the Catalans made history with a first ever European Cup, marking the summit of Cruyff's dream team. They healed 20-year-old wounds of 2 failed attempts, and it was all credited to the legend who had rebuilt Barcelona in every sense, then propelled them to new heights. The wait had ended, and the weight lifted, but there was no time to exhale, as 3 league games were still on their calendar. Even perfection gave no guarantee, leaving it all up to Los Blancos, so when they dropped points in Osasuna, Barca struck while the iron was hot, thrashing 6 past Valladolid a day later. And with both winning their next, it carried over to be decided on the ultimate match day of the season. Stoichkov, now dubbed El Pistolero, tucked away his 21st and 22nd of the year to steal maximum points from Bilbao inside the first half. By then in Tenerife, Real were 2-1 up and en route to title number 26. However, in one of the rivalry's biggest botches, the 15th place Canary Islanders flipped it on its head, closing out a 3-2 upset. Cruyff's never-say-die spirit had rubbed off to great effect, and their flawless record to conclude the campaign made them back-to-back champions by a single point. The icing on top of what was already their greatest season ever. The goal was achieved, but the job wasn't done, as Cruyff now aspired to dominate. The virtually unchanged squad shared this hunger, and having proved it to themselves, Barca carried a new type of confidence into 92-93. Momentum stayed with them as another Atletico beating extended their hold on the Supercopa, and on matchday 1, the El Clasico swung their way with a Stoichkov decider to commence a prolific stretch. The Ballon d'Or runner-up had a ferocious finish to 1992, tallying up 15 goals inside 13 matches, and Barca went into January ahead of the rest. It wasn't going so well elsewhere. The Intercontinental Cup went to Sao Paulo, and a shock loss at the hands of CSKA Moscow amplified the scrutiny. It seemed the dream team had gotten sloppy for no reason, and a lackluster end to the winter only fanned the rising flames of the press. The UEFA Super Cup helped cool the heat, and a third league title would just about save it, though the dip in form had put the great white shark in the driver's seat. It once again came down to the last day, and a sense of deja vu was in the air as Real travelled to Tenerife. It got ever more eerie when they again dropped the ball and sacrificed their shot at silverware to the Blaugrana, who took it for a three-peat. They salvaged their season, and while the city celebrated their first time going back-to-back-to-back, Cruyff and Rashak looked things over. Together, they had built a dynasty, but craved a crowning jewel to complete it. In Eindhoven, sporting the red and white of PSV, a short, stocky Brazilian was rivaling Barca's number 8 for the tag of world's most lethal. From 167 performances, Romario had averaged a goal per game to vindicate his conceited self-view.
Sempre me considerei o melhor dentro de campo. O matador, o artilheiro.
A club record €12 million surprised no one. The Dream Team had a new member. Seen as a direct route back to the big ears, Baixinho's arrival shifted Stoichkov back out left, which could have easily caused friction between the two massive egos, and mixing in the Carioca's party boy reputation, culés didn't know whether to fear or yearn for the potential fireworks. Their minds were made up pretty fast though. A Romario hat-trick on his La Liga debut encapsulated him perfectly. A toe poker with ice-cold composure. It takes a lot to upset a man who knows he's better than you. This attitude is what he brought to the squad, and Barca went back to believing they were the best, exuding a bold bravura that told upcoming opponents, "We're gonna outscore you." Before MSN, there was Laudrup, Stoichkov and Romario, an elite trio of different personalities with one common goal, and together they dialed it up a notch, wreaking havoc on Spain. It was too much to contain. The Brazilian's agility with bursts of acceleration made him an unmarkable menace of the box who could turn a half chance into a brace. The Bulgarian's fierce sprints and dizzying dribbles down the flank made for a cocktail that packed a punch. The Dane's almost mathematical mind could unravel a back line alone, and his wand of a right foot could supply the ammunition for the snipers ahead. Becoming too formulaic was Cruyff's nightmare, so having the trio's irresistible flair added an unpredictability factor to the team, and they became impossible to prepare for. Stoichkov and Romario established chemistry instantly, becoming friends off the pitch to reflect what was happening on it. Onlookers couldn't help but marvel at the pair, who would dance circles around defences with such grace before then ripping a vicious shot. The Brazilian went from fan favourite to legend when he single-handedly destroyed Real, with 3 of a historic 5-goal trouncing at the start of 1994. Feeling invincible, they weren't without their problems. Boasting 4 non-Spanish stars, all starters, Cruyff had to rotate them, and as the rumours go, leaving out the 2 Mavericks wasn't easy. Stoichkov could start a fight with his own shadow, and the other became a moody mute, so it was mostly between Koeman and Laudrup, a toss-up between conceding more goals or creating less chances. Either way, it hurt the side at times, as did the disciplinary issues. In the space of a few winter weeks, both forwards faced red card suspensions, and the team went through a purple patch, plunging into 3rd. Not prepared to surrender their rule over La Liga just yet, the next 3 months were as close to perfect as a coach could wish for, going completely unbeaten while averaging 3 goals per game, and not just at home, but abroad, strolling past Galatasaray, Monaco, Spartak Moscow, and Porto in the semis. They'd made a joke of the Portuguese at the end of an easy road to another European final, which was to come in the wake of one more crazy closing game day in Spain. This time their rivals were out of the picture, and it was Deportivo de La Coruña who stood against the champions, and were arguably the more deserving. Conceding only 18 goals all year, 25 fewer than the Catalans, they were their polar opposite, and with a surplus over them, became favourites. Hosting 7th place Valencia, a win would do it and was expected. Meanwhile in Barca, strikes from each of the trio had overwhelmed Sevilla to put them equal on points with the leaders. At the Riazor, however, the ref hadn't yet called it, and still goalless as it ticked into the last minute, a penalty was awarded. Miroslav Dukic, their 3rd choice taker, was their best available option, and the defender's weak effort was denied.
Ha parado González. Aquí ha estado el título de Liga.
The Blaugrana had done it for a 4th straight year, matching Real's record run from the 60s, and it was all down to the goals. 91 collectively, Cruyff had assembled an exhilarating outfit, undoubtedly the most demonstrative attacking team around, and on the verge of becoming all-timers. Within 4 days, the team flew to Athens and prepared for the now rebranded Champions League final, stinking of confidence. They arrived 20 games unbeaten, and on the other end was Capello's AC Milan, and no one from the bookies to neutrals to journalists hesitated in naming their pick.
Barcelona.
Barça.
Visca el Barça, Visca el Barça.
Van Basten injured, Baresi suspended along with Costa Curta, and in the post-Hullet Rijkaard years, this certainly wasn't them at their strongest, but the problem came from the Catalan camp. Cruyff adopted a very blasé attitude on the lead-up to the game, publicly dismissing them as nothing special. An air of entitlement plagued their dressing room, and the manager's message had changed. 2 years prior, it was enjoy it. Now the Dutchman's words were, you are better than them, you are going to win. Barca expected to simply collect the trophy, rather than compete for it, and what came was a brutal portion of karma.
La palla per Savicevic, si allunga il pallone, tira, Massaro, gol di penetrazione fuori Massaro, gol! E Savicevic gli ruba la palla e poi segna un gol, Besaì solo, Sono
4-0. A humiliation to stun the soccer sphere, and one they would never recover from. The cracks had been exposed, and in the aftermath they began to widen. Laudrup, amidst the fallout with Cruyff, had been benched against the Rossoneri, and when an offer to cross the divide came his way, he took the chance to sting his old boss. Joining forces with the enemy, he became the summer signing of Jorge Valdano's Real Madrid, and with Ivan Zamorano, guided Los Blancos back to the title.
Why? A lot of beloved guesses, people have said, no, he wanted to go to Madrid just to get some revenge. I said, revenge for what? I mean, I have a perfect time, 5 fantastic years here.
Nonetheless, one of the pillars was missing, and it wasn't long before Barcelona collapsed. Brazil's World Cup conquest had rekindled Romario's love for his homeland and the Rio Carnivals, which only stoked up his laissez-faire approach to training. The Dutch disciplinarian couldn't stand his no-shows for long, and off the back of their 5-0 El Clasico loss in January, loaned out the man he labelled the greatest player he'd ever coached.
There's nobody like Romario.
As for Stoichkov, he saw out the season, their worst since he first put on the blue and red, and now June of '95, the squad was nearly unrecognisable, absent of the Basque boys, so along with Koeman, he took the hint. Tintin returned to the Eredivisie, while the Ballon d'Or holder dipped his toe in Serie A, agreeing a deal with Parma. This was the death of the dream team. Johan Cruyff had put together his masterpiece, only to watch it crumble in his hands, and when Núñez was urged to sack El Salvador, it was the last we saw of the great man for over 13 years. Whether he'd fallen too deeply in love with his creation, or just grown arrogant and stubborn is up for debate, but there's no doubting his genius for doing as a manager what he'd done as a player, changed the game forever. Conceiving a tactical playing strategy that inspired a generation of coaches, Tiki-Taka was the basis for Guardiola's philosophy as he circled back to the Nou Camp and took it to the next level. Instilling a philosophy in the 80s, Cruyff placed the first domino in a sequence that spanned the next 4 decades, leading to a more innovative football. Having laid the foundation for his disciple to build the best team ever and foster the greatest to lace up the boots, it can be said with some comfort that Johan Cruyff's influence both on and off the pitch makes him football's most important figure of all time.